There is a mistake that millions of people make every single day, and it has nothing to do with their spending habits, their investment choices, or the salary they negotiate. It is not about what they buy. It is not about what they save. It is something far more invisible than that, something that slips past the logical mind entirely and strikes at the root of why certain households seem to accumulate wealth effortlessly, while others bleed it out silently no matter how hard they grind. What I am about to share with you today has been guarded carefully for a very long time. Not because it is dangerous in the wrong hands, but because the people who carried this knowledge understood that most minds are not ready to receive it. They understood that a truth delivered too early, before the student has suffered enough to take it seriously, is a truth that evaporates the moment the lesson ends. I was not supposed to be teaching this publicly. The man who taught me, a quiet scholar named Osvaldo Ferrentino, made me wait 7 years before he revealed the third piece. 7 years of partial understanding. 7 years of watching the first 2 principles work, while sensing there was something deeper I had not yet been trusted with. When he finally sat me down and completed the teaching, I understood immediately why he had waited. I was not the same person I had been at the beginning. I had been tested, broken open, and rebuilt. Only then was I ready. What Osvaldo taught me came from a lineage of Italian merchant families stretching back through the commercial cities of the Renaissance. Families who had survived wars, plagues, the collapse of banking houses, the rise and fall of entire economies. These were not people who relied on luck. They relied on laws. Invisible laws that governed the way prosperity moved through a household, the way it attached itself to certain objects and certain behaviors, and the way it quietly withdrew when those objects were neglected or discarded. I want you to understand something before we go any further. This is not a motivational speech. I'm not here to tell you that you simply need to believe harder or work smarter. I have no interest in offering you comfortable lies. The 3 things I'm about to describe are specific. They exist in your home right now, and the way you have been treating them, almost certainly without realizing it, may be the single most direct explanation for why financial stability has felt just out of reach. Let me tell you about the moment I first witnessed this with my own eyes. I was 24 years old, working as an apprentice to a restoration specialist in a city in northern Italy. My employer was a man named Corradino Mescaletti, and he had the kind of effortless financial life that confused everyone around him. He was not flashy. He did not drive an expensive car. He wore the same 3 jackets in rotation throughout the entire year. But money seemed to find him the way rivers find the sea. Contracts arrived unsolicited. Clients referred their wealthiest friends to him without being asked. Unexpected inheritances from distant relatives landed in his lap on 2 separate occasions during the years I knew him. I watched him carefully, the way young people watch someone who seems to carry a secret they have not yet spoken aloud. And one afternoon, when we were cleaning out an old storage room at the back of his workshop, I saw him do something that stopped me completely. He found a torn, discolored piece of cloth wrapped around a small bundle of objects. He unwrapped it slowly, almost reverently. Inside were 3 things that looked like nothing. Ordinary, worn, borderline worthless to any observer. He held each one briefly, placed them together on the windowsill in the late afternoon light, and stood there quietly for nearly a full minute before carefully rewrapping them and setting them aside. I asked him what they were. He looked at me for a long time before answering. Then he said in his unhurried way that they were the 3 things his grandmother had told him never to lose. He said that the day he had found them again after years of careless storage was the same week that the largest commission of his career had arrived. That exchange planted something in me that did not bloom fully until years later, when Osvaldo Ferentino finally gave me the complete framework that explained what Corradino had instinctively preserved. Here is the foundation of what Osvaldo taught me. Every household has an energetic character, not in a vague or romantic sense, but in a precise and observable sense. The objects inside a home are not passive. They carry residue. They carry memory. They carry the imprint of the intentions and emotions that surrounded their creation and their use. Some objects are neutral. Many are beneficial. But a small category of objects carries something that the old merchant families called corrente, which translates roughly as current, the way a river carries current. These objects are channels through which abundance flows into the domestic space. When you lose them, damage them carelessly, or discard them without ceremony, you interrupt the current. And an interrupted current does not simply pause, it redirects. It finds another household to flow through, one where the threshold objects are intact and honored. The science of this, for those who need a rational scaffold, is not unlike the science of attention and intention that modern psychology has begun to document seriously in the last 2 decades. What you consistently notice and respect in your environment, you unconsciously protect and cultivate. What you ignore or discard signals to your own subconscious a set of values about abundance and carefulness that then expresses itself in your financial behavior at every level, from the micro decisions you barely register to the large pivots that define decades of your life. But the mechanism goes deeper than psychology alone. Osvaldo was clear about this, and so was Corradino in his quieter way. There is a transactional dimension to the physical world that our modern framework is poorly equipped to measure, but that ancient practitioners documented with remarkable consistency across cultures that had no contact with one another. The 3 objects they identified are not arbitrary. They were not chosen for symbolic reasons or poetic elegance. They were identified through observation across generations, the kind of longitudinal observation that no modern study can replicate, because no modern institution has the patience to track a single principle across 6 generations of a family. But the merchant families did. They kept records. They noted correlations. They refined their understanding over centuries until what remained was precise and stripped of superstition. Now let me tell you what the 3 objects are. The first is a vessel that has been used to carry water into your home. Not just any vessel, a vessel that has served this function repeatedly, that has a history of use within your specific domestic space. In older households, this would have been a clay jug or a copper pitcher. In modern households, it might be a glass carafe, a ceramic bottle, a particular pot that has sat on the same shelf for years and been filled and emptied hundreds of times. The point is not the material. The point is the accumulated history of the object. Water is the original carrier of life in every tradition without exception. A vessel that has repeatedly carried water into the intimate space of your household has absorbed a quality that Osvaldo described as receptive resonance. It has been trained, in a sense, to receive and hold. When you throw away such a vessel, when you discard it casually because it is chipped or old-fashioned or simply because you are reorganizing the kitchen, you are removing a trained receptor from your household. What enters through the threshold of your home, including financial opportunity, needs somewhere to land. Without these receptors, it passes through without taking root. What should you do instead? If the vessel is broken beyond use, do not throw it in the trash. Take it outside and return it to the earth, either by burying it in soil or by placing it in running water if that is accessible to you. This act of return closes the energetic cycle gracefully. The vessel is released with gratitude, rather than discarded with carelessness. If the vessel is merely old or aesthetically unwanted, keep it. Give it a permanent place. You do not need to display it. A shelf in a pantry or a corner of a storage space is sufficient. Its function is presence, not decoration. The second object is a source of light that has burned inside your home. Again, the specificity matters. Not a light source you purchased yesterday. A candle that has been lit in your home on multiple occasions, particularly during meals or gatherings. A lamp that has sat in the same corner for years. An oil burner that has been present during important conversations, decisions and celebrations within your household. The old merchant families were specific about this. They said that a flame which has witnessed the full range of a household's emotional life, its joy and its grief, its planning and its rest, carries an imprint of the household's vitality itself. In the philosophy that Osvaldo carried, light is not simply illumination. It is testimony. A flame that has burned inside a household while life was lived around it has become a witness. And in the energetic architecture of a home, witnesses matter. They hold continuity. They anchor the household's sense of itself across time. When you discard them without ceremony, a small but real thread of continuity snaps. The household loses a piece of its recorded history. Now, I need to acknowledge that in a strictly modern household, candles burn down to nothing and the remnant gets thrown away. Osvaldo was clear about this. What matters is that you do not throw away the holder itself casually. The physical container that has held repeated flames inside your home, the brass candlestick that has been on the dining table for years, the ceramic holder your daughter bought you, the glass lantern from your living room shelf, these are the witnesses. These are what you protect. The wax comes and goes. The vessel of light is what carries the testimony. If you must let such an object go, do so with full awareness. Hold it briefly. Acknowledge what it has witnessed. Express gratitude, not in a theatrical way, but in the quiet, sincere way that you might acknowledge a long-serving colleague who is leaving. Then release it intentionally, rather than tossing it into a garbage bag without thought. The third object is the one that Osvaldo made me wait 7 years to receive, and I suspect you will understand why once I explain it. The third object is an unfinished project that lives somewhere in your home. Something you began with genuine intention and never completed. A piece of writing you started. A craft or creative work you set aside. A plan you sketched out and then shelved. A business idea you mapped in a notebook. A renovation you began and paused. The unfinished thing. I know what the first reaction to this is, because I had the same reaction when Osvaldo finally told me. I thought he was going to say something profound and ancient, and instead he was pointing to the half-finished manuscript on my own desk as evidence of the most important energetic principle of household abundance. But sit with it for a moment, because the depth of this principle is not immediately obvious. The old merchant families observed something consistent across generations. Households where unfinished projects were preserved, where the evidence of incomplete intentions was kept visible and respected, rather than hidden or discarded, were households where new projects came to completion more reliably. The presence of an unfinished thing is not a mark of failure. In the merchant family framework, it is proof that this household has the capacity to hold ambitious intentions. The unfinished project is a living signal that says people here dream large enough to begin things that take longer than a single season. That is a signal that abundance recognizes. When you throw away your unfinished projects, when you clear out the notebook, burn the draft, donate the half-built cabinet to a stranger without ceremony, you are removing the evidence of your own capacity. You are telling the space around you that ambition without completion is shameful and must be hidden. And that signal, broadcast consistently across years, shapes the way opportunity approaches you. Opportunity seeks households that are already in motion. It is not interested in empty spaces, waiting to be filled from scratch. This does not mean you must hoard every abandoned idea forever. Osvaldo was careful here. The distinction he drew was between discarding and releasing. You discard something when you want it gone, because it represents something you are ashamed of or want to forget. You release something when you acknowledge it fully, honor the intention that created it, and consciously make space for what comes next. An unfinished project that you release with that kind of conscious awareness does not damage your household's energetic record. One that you throw away in a fit of self-criticism or frustrated house cleaning absolutely does. He told me that this was the principle that took the most discipline to apply consistently, because we live in a culture that is merciless about incompletion. We have been taught that unfinished things are embarrassing. We have internalized the idea that a person's worth is measured only by what they finish and deliver. And so we purge the unfinished things, not because they have no value, but because we cannot tolerate looking at what they make us feel about ourselves. The households that have preserved wealth across multiple generations, the merchant families Osvaldo studied, and the men like Corradino, who carried echoes of that tradition without knowing its full name. Those households had a fundamentally different relationship with incompletion. They saw the unfinished thing as a seed. A seed is not a failure to be a tree. A seed is exactly what it needs to be, at the stage it is at. Throwing away a seed because it has not yet become a tree is the kind of impatience that makes whole orchards disappear. What should you do with your unfinished projects? First, find them. All of them. The notebooks, the files, the half-assembled objects, the plans that are somewhere in a drawer. Gather them. Not to finish them necessarily, but to acknowledge that they exist. Create a space for them that is not a shame corner, but a genuine repository of intention. Osvaldo called this the record of your ambition. Treat it with the same respect you would give to any important archive. Visit it occasionally. Add to it when new intentions begin. And when something in it genuinely needs to be released, release it with the full ceremony of acknowledgement rather than the violence of erasure. I want to be direct with you about what happens when all three of these objects are honored simultaneously, because the compound effect is significantly greater than any one of them alone. The water vessel anchors your home's capacity to receive. The light witness anchors your home's continuity and recorded vitality. The unfinished project anchors your home's relationship with ambition and becoming. Together they create what Osvaldo called the triangle of domestic current. A household in which all three are present and honored is a household that is continuously signaling to the energetic world that it is open, capable, and in motion. That combination is precisely what abundance requires before it will settle. I have shared these principles with a small number of people over the years, always in private conversations, always with the warning that this is not a shortcut and not a magic trick. The results I have witnessed have been humbling. A woman in her late 40s who had spent 2 decades in financial stagnation, despite competence and hard work, began honoring these 3 objects. Within 3 months, a dormant partnership opportunity she had dismissed years earlier resurfaced through an unexpected contact and resulted in the most significant financial shift of her adult life. She told me she did not believe in the mechanism. She simply respected it because she respected me. The belief turned out to be irrelevant. A man who had been carrying shame about a business he had started and failed found an old planning notebook from that period in a box he was about to discard. Instead of throwing it away, he followed the instruction. He honored it. He put it on a shelf. He told me later that looking at it daily without shame had fundamentally changed his relationship with risk. Within a year, he had launched a second business that succeeded where the first had not, carrying forward lessons he had previously been too ashamed to access. These are not miraculous stories. They are stories about alignment. When the physical environment of a household is aligned with respect for receiving, continuity, and ambition, the people inside that household begin to behave differently in ways they often cannot fully articulate. And different behavior in the direction of these principles produces different outcomes. The consistency is not magic, it is cause and effect, operating at a level most modern frameworks refuse to look at. I will close with what Osvaldo said to me on the day he completed the teaching. He said that the greatest poverty is not the absence of money, it is the absence of the conditions that allow money to stay. A person can receive an extraordinary sum and lose it within a year if the architecture of their household does not know how to hold it. And a person can begin with almost nothing and accumulate steadily, generation upon generation, if the household learns and maintains the conditions for retention. He said that the merchant families he studied were not smarter than their neighbors. They were not luckier. They were simply more careful about what they let go of and what they kept. They understood that certain losses are not neutral. Certain things, once discarded carelessly, take the conditions for prosperity with them when they leave. Look around your home tonight. Find your water vessel. Find your light witness. Find your unfinished thing. Not because any of this is magic, but because your relationship with these three objects tells you something true and important about how you are currently treating the conditions for abundance in your own life. What you find may surprise you. What you do with what you find will matter far more than anything I can say here.